Hello friends and family, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Vanessa and this is Little Tooth Adventures, where I sometimes vlog about my life and sometimes teach you how to sew. Today I will be showing you my new pattern, which is bike shorts and leggings. All my patterns are available on toothandeye.com. The best part about my patterns is they range from size extra small to 5X, or at least that's my goal for all of them. My patterns are intended for personal use and small businesses only. Big businesses can take a hike. What does that mean? That means that you can sew for yourself, sew as a gift for your friends, or you can sew a small number and sell them. You just can't resell the pattern. That would make me sad. Even though I am sewing bike shorts in this video, the same rules apply to leggings. Let's jump into it. You'll need your pattern cut to the size you want, 4-way or 2-way stretch fabric, 1.5-inch sport elastic, scissors or a rotary blade. You will probably also need pins. Starting off with your elastic, cut the desired length you need. You can do this by wrapping it around your waist snugly and then adding an inch, or use the guidelines in my pattern. For me, 24 inches was snug yet comfortable, so I cut 25 inches. I like to seal the edges quickly with a lighter. This prevents fraying. Fold over the edges of the elastic by 1 inch and pin. It should look like this. Using a straight stitch, set your needle to the middle position. Sew the elastic together by creating a rectangle shape with an X through the middle. It should look roughly like this. Then tie off the ends. Lay out your fabric and determine which way is the stretchiest. You want the stretch to go along the width of the pattern. Lay out your pattern and make sure the fabric is flattened out. And make sure the grain line is going along the grain of the fabric. For me, the grain line is lining up with the side of the fabric. And using your scissors or rotary blade, cut out the fabric. That's one leg done, now on to the other. Lay out your fabric again, making sure to determine stretch and grain. But this time, when you lay out your pattern, flip it over. That way, we will be creating a mirrored version of the other leg. Cut out like before. Now you have leg 2. Lay out your first leg with the waistband up, and with right sides together, lay out the second leg on top of the first leg, making sure these two seams are lined up. These will be the front and back crotch seams. Now pin these two seams together evenly. It should look roughly like this. Now you will serge or zigzag stitch these two seams. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam with my blade up. Start from the waistband and end at the crotch. Do the same for both seams. It'll look roughly like this. Now we will create the leg holes. Line up the 2 crotch seams you just created and pin. You're going to want to make sure the seams are laying in opposite directions. This makes sewing over them later a lot easier. Now start pinning evenly from the bottom of the leg hole all the way up to the crotch. The seam should lay flat. Repeat on the other leg. As you can see, everything lays flat and lines up, and the crotch seams are crossed over each other. Now on to sewing. This first part is optional, but I like to do it because it reinforces the crotch area, which has a lot of movement. This can be done with either a zigzag stitch or a serge. Starting a couple inches before the crotch, start sewing. Once you get to the crotch area, make sure that your seams are facing opposite directions and that the actual seam itself is lined up. Continue sewing and chain off a couple inches after the crotch. This is your reinforcement seam. Now start sewing, starting at the leg hole opening. Continue sewing with your blade up until you get to your reinforcement seam. Clip the threads, put down your blade, and continue sewing over the reinforcement seam. Once you're at the end of that seam, pop your blade up and continue sewing all the way down the leg. Now you have this double duty seam that will help prevent tearing because of all the movement in that area. Once that's finished, sew around the opening of the leg hole. This will help for hemming later. Repeat for both leg holes, tying off the thread ends. Flip right side out, pinch the crotch seam, and determine which part of the waist is the higher part. This is the back. Mark with a pin or a washable pen. Now grab your waistband elastic from earlier. Using the sewn part of the elastic as the back marker, place pins marking out the front and sides evenly. Feel free to add pins evenly between each of those, for a total of 8 pins spaced out evenly. Now repeat the same pinning process on the waist hole opening. If you used 8 pins on the elastic, make sure you use 8 pins on the waist opening. Now using all those pins as markers, pin the waistband elastic into the waist hole opening, lining up the crossed over elastic with the back of the waistband. In the end, you should have something that looks roughly like this. Now we will sew the elastic to the waistband opening. If you're using a serger, make sure your blade is down. Starting from the back of the waistband, stretch the fabric and the elastic out taut so that they line up smoothly. and put your presser foot and needle down. Sew along the whole opening, making sure you're pulling the elastic and the fabric taut the whole time. Only pop the blade up when you need to snip the previous threads. Chain off and tie off your threads. Look at this bad boy, we are so close to being finished. I like to use this opportunity to mark the back of the waistband with either a soft ribbon or a sew-in clothing tag. Now we will fold the elastic inside to finish off the waistband. Starting at one of the seams, fold down, lining up the seam, pulling the elastic taut, and then pinning. You want the elastic to be snug within the fabric without it being bunched. Repeat on the other seam. Now determine the sides. Pull taut, fold down, and pin. Repeat this as many times as you'd like. I usually pin about 4 to 8 pins. The more pins, the easier it will be for you in the next step. You should have something that roughly looks like this. If you're using a zigzag stitch, flip inside out like I've done here. If you're using a cover stitch, keep it right side out. Using your longest zigzag stitch setting, sew along the bottom of the elastic. I've included my settings as reference. Sew along the whole waistband, keeping the elastic and the fabric taut. If you come to a bulky seam, you can use my wedge trick. Usually I use an emery board and place it right behind the needle and the seam. And then I sew slowly over the bulky seam, making sure none of the threads bunch. Once past the bulky seam, continue sewing like normal, keeping the elastic and the fabric taut. This is very important. Before going over your original seam, tie that thread off. Sew over your original seam, backstitch, and then tie off your threads. Now your waistband is done. Now we are on the final step, which is hemming the leg holes. Flip inside out and line up one of the inner leg seams somewhere in the middle, kind of like I've done. Now using that seam as a guide, fold up by 1 inch and pin. Flip over and do the same thing on the other side. Continue this process all along the opening of the leg hole. Honestly, the more pins on this part, the better. You just want to make sure you fold it up evenly by 1 inch. This will help stabilize it a lot more when you sew in the next part. Look how glorious that is. Now repeat on the other leg. Once both leg holes are pinned, let's start sewing. For a zigzag stitch, keep inside out and slip over the free arm of your sewing machine. Usually the default of your zigzag stitch will work perfectly fine for this. I've included my settings as reference. Now sew all the way along the leg hole opening, trying not to pull the fabric too taut. As you can see, I am using a walking foot, which is always better for stretch fabrics. Once you get to your original seam, remember to tie that off, then continue sewing over, then tie off your final seam. Repeat this on the other leg hole. Pull out all your pins, and now you are done making your very own pair of bike shorts or leggings. Now it's time to admire your handiwork. Hot damn, are you talented. If you made these for yourself, be sure to pop these puppies on and take them out into the wild. Not only are these perfect for fashion, they are also excellent for yoga and fitness. They make your butt look great too. If you do end up using my pattern, make sure to tag me on Instagram, because I would love to see your creations. Well, if you enjoyed that and felt like you learned something and would also like to learn more, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.